We have been starving for a couple of years for a really good, talented, deep running back class, and the 2025 NFL Draft seems to deliver. There's some really great running back prospects, not only at the top, but also the depth of the class is really impressive as well. So this is going to have huge implications for fantasy football teams, dynasty teams, and NFL teams as well. So we're going to go ahead and dive into the top 10 running backs in the 2025 NFL Draft. Starting at number 10 here with R.J. Harvey out of UCF. He's a senior, 5'9", 208 pounds, very, very productive runner, 1,500 yards, 22 touchdowns this year, in addition to 267 yards and 3 touchdowns in the receiving game as well. You look at Harvey, he's not the biggest guy. He's not necessarily the fastest either. His size is not a major concern. I mean, he's short, but he's very dense as well. He is not a great pass blocker because of that, and that's probably the number one thing that you want to see him improve on is kind of his passing game ability. Not only to go out, catch routes, but also to pass block, because that is a huge, huge thing for running backs. I think it's often overlooked. He has really good elusiveness, though. His jump cut is really impressive. His contact balance, he fights hard for yards very, very consistently. And that's why you see him so productive against Big 12 type of defenses. I think most likely he's going to be an RB2 in the NFL, a guy that comes in is kind of your change of pace back. He's probably not a third down back because what I mentioned before, he's not a good pass protector. He's not very good when it comes to the receiving game. I mean, he's decent. He's a fine check down option, but he's not going to be routing up linebackers and things. He is a senior, so he's a little bit older than some of the other guys on this list, but I do like R.J. Harvey, his ability to break tackles in space, burst into the second level. I do think that he definitely has some elusiveness in the open field and is very, very difficult to tackle. So as kind of a guy that can come in and be an RB2 in the third or fourth round, I definitely like him as a kind of developmental running back prospect at number 10 there. At number 9, we have a really, really interesting player. That's Brashard Smith out of SMU. He's a senior, 5'10", 196 pounds, so he's definitely a bit on the slender side. But the really interesting thing about Smith is that he played wide receiver at University of Miami for the Hurricanes for 3 years before transferring this past year, coming to SMU, and then converting to running back as well. And all he did after converting is put up 1,100 yards, 14 touchdowns, and he's still a relatively effective receiver as well, 29 receptions, 269 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And unlike kind of R.J. Harvey before, who was mostly doing that on checkdowns, screens, things like that, Smith can be a legitimate weapon in the passing game. And I think that's part of what makes him so enticing, is that he is a wide receiver converted playing running back, so he still has a ton of the ball skills, the route running, the kind of ability in space that he did as a wide receiver. He wasn't a great wide receiver, and that's part of the reason he changed to running back, but I think the receiving chops are still absolutely there in his game. He's not a great pass protector. He didn't do that much at wide receiver, so in his first season as a running back, staying in there and being able to protect his quarterback, still something he needs to continue to work on. I'm not sure his frame and his size are really going to allow him to be great in that area in the NFL, so he's probably going to be kind of a gadget type of third down back where he's mostly a receiver, and then I do think he's effective on early downs as well. He does need to protect the ball a little bit better, had 3 fumbles this past year, but his speed, his burst are really impressive. I think his vision, he's still kind of working out some of the nuances of playing the running back position. He's actually very patient at times behind the offensive line, which is something you like to see. It's a fine balance between being decisive and being patient. I think he toes that line a little bit too often, where he is not really being very decisive, and I think that is sometimes problematic. But his elusiveness in space, I think he is relatively tough to bring down. Despite his size, less than 200 pounds, I think he can be really tough to bring down in between the tackles. His jump cuts, his ability to kind of get guys in space and then put them in a blender. I do really like a lot of his ability. So he I definitely think could follow the Tyrone Tracy type of route where he was a wide receiver, converted to running back for Purdue, and then has been really pretty good for the Giants as a rookie. I think that Brashard Smith could follow a relatively similar path. He's already been very productive at running back at SMU, and somebody that I would definitely take a swing on in the third or fourth round. And Harvey and Smith are very, very close in my rankings to who I have at number 8. That's DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. He's a junior, 6'1", 212 pounds. So he's a tall running back, and he is not the biggest, most densely built guy, but he definitely does have some size, and I think he can continue to build on some of that size. He has decent burst, but what impresses you the most about DJ Giddens is his contact balance. He is really good, despite him not being the biggest, thickest player on this list. He is really good at breaking tackles, setting guys up, and fighting hard for the extra yards, and that's something I love to see in a running back. To me, kind of the most important categories in this group are contact balance, vision, and then, elusiveness as well. Those are really traits where you're creating beyond what the offensive line is blocking up for you, and I think Giddens does do that relatively effectively when it comes to his contact balance, his ability to break off tackles. He's not a huge receiver. He can definitely do it. He has 258 receiving yards and a touchdown in 2024. Also put up 1,300 yards and 7 touchdowns. So all of these guys thus far have been wildly productive, and Giddens certainly continues that trend as well. He is not somebody that I think is going to be a major difference maker in the receiving game. His pass blocking isn't quite there. Sometimes he's not seeming to put full effort into a lot of that pass protection, and that's not going to get him on the field on third downs. I don't think he's the best receiver, but he has decent hands, can be a check down option. His elusiveness in open field is another area where I think he can continue to get better. He doesn't have the best stop-start ability. Guys kind of put him in a blender, make him miss out in space, but most of the time in between the tackles, if you get an arm on him, he's not going down on first contact, and I love to see that. He's falling forward, he's fighting hard. As a true junior as well, he's somebody that has been very productive for multiple seasons for Kansas State and still has room for improvement as well. So I do like DJ Giddens. He's somebody that, once again, I kind of foresee as an RB2 in the league, someone that can come in, spell your number one running back, and be a productive player. But I think round 3 or 4, I could definitely see a role for DJ Giddens in the NFL for sure. At number 7, we have Penn State running back Nick Singleton, junior, 6 foot, 226 pounds, so very well built as per usual out of a guy coming out of Penn State. They put out athletes from that university, and Singleton's definitely one of those guys as well. He's big, he's pretty athletic, he's got pretty good burst for being how big he is. He does a good job taking care of the football. It's something that he can continue to improve on. He's improved every year in that area. But really what makes him pretty exciting to me is that he's a really good receiver, and he's a really good pass blocker as well. One of the best pass blockers in this class. I don't think he's quite the best, but he does a great job with his technique, with his willingness, his ability to step up and be really productive in that area, which will get him on the field early on third downs in the NFL. I also think as a receiver, he's definitely shown he can make guys miss in space. He can be an athlete out in the field where there's kind of more space and less defenders. He can make guys miss, power through them. I think his contact balance in between the tackles is something that he can continue to improve on. With how big he is, you'd expect him to be a little bit better at making guys miss, falling forward, not going down on first contact. That's something I do want to see more of. And I think just his general ability to make guys miss, even out in the open field, I think it's something that he can continue to improve on. But what I do like is Singleton, especially on outside zone, where he can put his foot into the ground, use his athleticism, and then hit that back foot and get upfield quickly. I thought he really showed a lot of promise on outside zone type of schemes, so I definitely think the wide zone Shanahan style offenses could benefit Singleton really effectively. And then a lot of his third down work, his passing game work is definitely something that's very enticing as well. So he hasn't had quite as much production. He shared the backfield with Katron Allen, who's another draft eligible running back out of Penn State. But Singleton in pretty limited carries, 733 yards, 7 touchdowns, put up almost 300 yards and 4 touchdowns in the receiving game as well. So Singleton I also have very similarly graded to the previous 3 guys on the list as well. It's a very good deep running back class. And I do think the top 6 are a clear top 6 in my opinion, but the next bunch of guys are also really talented as well. And Singleton I think might be the best of that next tier down from the top 6, but he's somebody that I do think could turn into a really good third down running back and somebody that can come in and spell your RB1 as well. I think he would be best as part of a committee, kind of like he was at Penn State. At number 6, we have Cam Skattebo out of Arizona State. He is an incredibly fun player. Went to Sacramento State, transferred over to Arizona State. He's a senior, 5'11", 215 pounds. And the big thing with Skattebo is he's not the most physically gifted player. His size is pretty average. His speed is maybe even below average for a running back prospect. But he just runs so hard, and so many of the nuanced things about the running back position I think he's really, really good at. Like I mentioned before, contact balance, vision, and elusiveness are some of the biggest traits that I look for in a running back, and I think that's really where he kind of thrives. His contact balance, his ability to fight off defenders, not go down on first contact, make guys miss, fight off arm tackles. I think he's really, really good in that regard. His vision, I think, is really impressive. He's consistently hitting the right hole, knowing when to bounce outside, setting guys up, using his blocks really effectively and their leverage. And then his elusiveness out in space is also a really, really good trait of his as well. He constantly forces defenders to take bad angles. He's forcing them, out in the open field to miss with juke, spins, all the moves that a running back would use. He's really, really effective in that regard. And he's also a very productive receiving back as well. He had 468 yards and 2 touchdowns to go along with his 1,300 yards and 17 touchdowns on the ground as well. The big thing with him, he's not the most physically gifted runner. And, that's going to be a question mark of where NFL teams value him. He also has had some issues with fumbling the football. That's something he absolutely needs to clean up. But most of the other areas of his game, I think, are really impressive. If you can get over the fact that he's maybe a average to even below average athlete, I think he can be a really good running back. I don't think he's going to be a lead back because of those athletic limitations, and that's why he's number 6 to me of the top running backs in this class. I think there is a clear tier gap for me between number 6 and number 7, in my personal opinion, but I think that Scadaboo is somebody that is really fun to watch. He does things the right way. I think he's a good pass protector, can get on the field early in third down situations, and he runs his tail off, and that's something I absolutely love to see. I think he can be a very, very fun RB2 for an NFL team. I would take him late round 2, early round 3, be anywhere comfortable right with that turn there. I think he's a very, very fun player. And then at number 5, we have Kaleb Johnson, who is definitely higher on some people's boards. I watched him, and don't get me wrong, I think he's a good player, but I'm not quite on. I know some people have late round 1 grades on him. I'm not quite there with him. He is incredibly productive through the regular season, 1,500 yards, 21 touchdowns, had 188 yards and 2 touchdowns on the receiving game as well. He's a big, big man, 6 foot, 225 pounds, has ran through the Big Ten as a true junior. You look at his size, it's ideal, absolutely. His speed is pretty decent for a guy his size. It's more build-up speed. I don't think he has ridiculously great high-end top speed, but I think his burst into the second level is kind of deceptive for a lot of secondary players in the Big Ten. You would see him force bad angles just because I think his burst is really pretty impressive for a guy his size. His ball security is good. He doesn't turn the ball over very often. His contact balance for a guy that big, I will say it's good, don't get me wrong, but it is one of those things where you would watch, of course, some of the other guys that we're going to get to in this class, but even Scadaboo and RJ Harvey, these guys that are constantly forcing people to bounce off of them, making the first guy miss, fighting for the extra yards. I think Johnson is a big, powerful guy, but it's especially when he gets up and moving that he's really good at breaking tackles. If it's contacts at the line of scrimmage or in the backfield, obviously that's very detrimental to any running back, but I don't think Johnson handles it quite as well as I would hope for a guy that big, but he makes up for it with his excellent vision. He has some of the best vision in the entire class. He's constantly hitting the right holes. He is getting up to that build-up speed, and he's kind of that one-cut type of running back, like we talked about before, where maybe he isn't the most quick, speedy guy, but he gets up and goes, has that burst. He kind of gets that force and acceleration going, and all of a sudden, he's a runaway train running down the middle of your defense because he has great vision and can get up to speed pretty quickly. But if you can make him, uncomfortable in the backfield early on in the running play, I think you can kind of slow him down a little bit. He also isn't very advanced in the receiving game. I think for pass blocking, he's most of the time, he was just cutting guys. He isn't super technical in his pass blocking. Absolutely, that could bump up for sure because he's 225 pounds. He has the perfect frame to be a really good pass protector. I just don't think he showed it a whole lot at Iowa. And then as a receiver, he doesn't look supernatural out in space with his hands. I think he's a perfectly fine check down option. Once again, if you get him the ball in space and then you let him get ahead of steam and get moving upfield, I definitely think he can be productive. But he's not the most natural receiver of the guys on this list. So to me, he's somebody that I would take end of round 2, early round 3. I think he's going to go before that, and I get that the traits are pretty enticing. Just for me personally, I didn't see him as some special running back prospect, but definitely a guy that I think could maybe be a 1A in a backfield. I think he would still be part of a committee, but maybe somebody that could be the better running back of the two, and you'd be happy with some of the results you could get, especially if you put him in one of those wide zone schemes where he can really kind of use his vision and his burst upfield and be really effective. At number 4, I have Trevion Henderson out of Ohio State. Henderson is not the biggest guy. He's 5'10", 208 pounds. He came into Ohio State and as a true freshman, absolutely dominated. He looked like the next great running back prospect. Dealt with a ton of injuries his sophomore year. Last year, he was better, but still wasn't able to replicate the success of his freshman year. And then this year, he shared the backfield with Quinshon Judkins, and so he's been the most efficient he's been, but he's not necessarily putting up ridiculous numbers. Had 108 carries, 751 yards, 6 touchdowns, had 19 receptions for 135 yards as well. But like I said, I think his efficiency has only gone up. He just shares a backfield with one of the best running backs in the country as well. So I wouldn't judge the numbers too hard with Henderson or Judkins. His size, his speed, his burst, none of that is ridiculously impressive. I think it is better than somebody like Cam Scattaboo, and that's why I have him rated a little bit higher. He's still got similar problems, though, where it's not this elite athlete. But you look over that because he has fantastic ball security, has fumbled only once. That was his freshman year. The last 3 seasons, he hasn't fumbled in his college career at Ohio State. And I think he is the best pass protector in this class. He's somebody that can step up. He is so effective on third downs, stepping up, filling the hole. You know, he is really, really good at identifying blitzes, has great technique, very willing, and that's going to get him on the field incredibly early. Even though he's not the biggest guy, that willingness and that technique is fantastic to see. And I think he's a good receiving back. They don't use him a whole lot, but I think he is somebody that you get him out in space. He can be a nice check down option. He can be somebody that reliably catches the ball, moves the chains for you. He's not special in that regard, but I do think he is a good, reliable option in the receiving game, which will mean that he can get onto the field very early on third downs. He has good contact balance. He's somebody that can make guys miss, but I think he's more elusive in the open field. You get him out in space, you let him hit his jump cut, spin move, juke moves. That's where he's really effective. And then I think his vision is pretty good as well. I think he's consistently hitting the right holes, knowing where to go. He's a pretty advanced, experienced running back at this point. Like I said, started as a true freshman, and since then has been kind of the primary running back for Ohio State up until this year where he's sharing time with Judkins. So he's seen a lot of carries. He's somebody that's very experienced, and I think that experience shows. He's another guy that I don't think necessarily is going to be a dominant number 1 running back for a team, but he's going to be a fantastic part of a committee, somebody that can come in, be really efficient with his touches, help you out in the passing game as a receiver and also as a blocker, and be somebody that I think just brings a great mentality to a team. So I have a true second round grade on him. Somewhere kind of maybe towards the middle or back half of round 2 is really where I'd feel comfortable with Henderson. I think he's a good player and somebody that can turn into a nice contributor for an NFL team. Then at number 3, we have Henderson's teammate Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State. He was a transfer from Ole Miss where he was incredibly productive in the SEC. 6 foot, 219 pounds. He's a little bit bigger, more athletic, I think, than Henderson. He's a junior as well. He has 805 yards, 8 touchdowns, 15 receptions, 109 yards, and a touchdown. So his size is really good. That's what you want to see. 6 foot, 219 pounds. He's thick. He's well built. He's got good athleticism. His speed and burst is really impressive. He takes care of the football. He's definitely not as good in the receiving game. And in particular, the pass blocking ability is definitely nowhere close to Henderson. He does put in effort, but it's most of the time he's a little bit slower to ID the blitz. He's not got the same great technique that Henderson has, and I think he can definitely develop in this area, but it's still an area where I think he does need to improve to be a true 3-down workhorse type of back in the NFL is his ability in the passing game, in particular, the pass blocking game. His receiving ability is solid. It's nothing crazy, ridiculously good, but he can definitely take checkdowns, be efficient on screens, things like that. His contact balance is really good. He consistently throwing guys off him, making guys miss, arm tackles, not letting him, take him down on first contact. I think his vision is an area that he can continue to improve on as well. I think most of the time he's hitting the right hole and he's doing a good job in that area. But I do think there are times where he maybe bounces it outside a little bit too early, gets a little bounce happy, maybe isn't hitting that cutback that's open if he, just hits the jump cut. So I think he can continue to improve on that area, but Judkins is incredibly physically gifted. He takes care of the football. He is a guy that has the potential to be a true 3-down workhorse running back if he can continue to really build and put everything together. So I think I slightly prefer Judkins out of the Ohio State backfield. I think Henderson is maybe the better player right now, but Judkins is really talented in it of itself. And I have very, very similar grades on the last 4 guys. So very, very close. I think you could rank them in really any way, and I wouldn't push back too hard. But to me, the top 2 running backs in this class are kind of a little bit in a tier of their own. I think who I have at number 2, that's Omarion Hampton, is in his own tier, and then we'll talk about number 1 in a second, but he is definitely in his own tier as well. For Omarion Hampton, out of North Carolina, he's a junior, 6 foot, 220 pounds, so has great size, definitely the ideal type of big bruising running back build. He's ridiculously productive. 1,660 yards, 15 touchdowns. In the receiving game, very productive as well. 38 catches, 373 yards, and 2 touchdowns. After Drake May left last year, Hampton really kind of became the identity of this North Carolina offense. And even though they're not winning a ton of games, I think Hampton has definitely shown that he is a really, really good player. His size and athleticism combination is awesome to see. You do want to see him take better care of the football, and that's an area that he can definitely improve on, but his vision is really good. I think he's consistently hitting the right hole. His ability to make guys miss and his contact balance and unwillingness to go down on first contact is so awesome to see. To me, he's a guy that just fights for every yard, consistently falls forward. He's going to get you what the offensive line blocks up with his great vision, and then he's not going to go down on first contacts, get that extra 2 or 3 yards consistently with his great contact balance, his power, his athleticism. And also, I think he is pretty great in the receiving game as well. As a pass blocker, he's a really, really good one. I think, one of the better ones in this class, just due to his size and pure willingness. That's going to be effective for the most part, but I also think he has pretty good technique as well. I think he can continue to get better in that regard, but I think he is a guy that has true 3-down running back potential, and I think he can be that type of player from day one in the NFL as well, because his receiving is pretty good as well. He doesn't drop the ball super often. He can be a reliable check down option, somebody that can find spaces in the soft zones of the defense and be effective after the catch as well. So I am a huge fan of Omarion Hampton. I have a late round 1, early round 2 grade on him. I would have him as running back 1 in the class last year, so I really like Hampton. I think he's a great player and will turn into a 3-down complete running back for one of these teams. But there is a reason he is number 2, and that's because AShton Jeanty is in this class. And for me personally, I still think he should be the Heisman Trophy winner. No, it's going to be Travis Hunter. But this guy's just putting up obscene numbers. He has 312 carries, which is absurd. But 2,288 yards, 28 touchdowns. Also has 18 receptions, 102 yards, and a touchdown as well. Really, there's just not much to be critical of when it comes to AShton Jeanty's game. He's short, but he's very compactly built. He's very powerful. His athleticism is really, really good. He doesn't turn the ball over, has great ball security. And the things that I talked about that are most important to me for a running back, his contact balance is the best I've ever seen of any running back prospect. He is ridiculous at breaking tackles, not going down on first contact. I mean, you just watch any game of AShton Jeanty, and he is just throwing guys off him very, very consistently. There was a stat like halfway through the season, the number 1 running back in the country is AShton Jeanty, and the number 2 running back in the country by yardage is AShton Jeanty after contact, which is just absurd numbers. He has really, really great vision. He's consistently getting what the offensive line is blocking up for him, and then his elusiveness in the open field, his jump cut ability is so good, and his ability to know where the gaps of that defense is, and then throw off any arm tackles or any guys in the hole with his great contact balance. That just makes him borderline impossible to tackle. And he is so good in that regard. As a receiving back as well, he did it a lot less this year, only 102 yards and a touchdown. But last year, he led the nation in yards for running backs in the receiving game, 578 yards and 5 touchdowns. And that was a huge part of his game. And really, he shows great willingness in pass protection. That's something that he definitely puts a lot of effort into. He has good technique. He's just a little bit smaller, so he's not going to be Omarion Hampton when it comes to his ability to pass protect. But I still think he is a good pass protector. I think that's a strength of his game, and there's just not a lot of negative things at all to say about AShton Jeanty. To me, I have a truly elite grade on him, a 96.25. It's a top 10 grade. I would take him in the top 10 if, I was a team that needed a running back. I think he is a truly blue chip special player in this draft that quite honestly doesn't have a lot of those. AShton Jeanty will be the 101 of any kind of dynasty drafts when it comes to fantasy football, things like that. So he is a special, special player. And for me, he is right up there with Bijan Robinson for the best running backs prospects I have ever scouted. So a truly, truly fantastic running back and a really good class as well. Looking at some of the honorable mentions, guys that just missed this list, I had, other guys I watched as well, but these were just the next 5 on the list. Dylan Sampson, he's a really fun, athletic type of guy. He's a little bit slimmer. I think he's not quite as good within the tackles, but he has true home run ability. Woody Marks, he was at Mississippi State for 4 years, transferred to USC. I think he's really good at making guys miss in space. I think he can be a contributor in the receiving game. Bashal Tutin has great athleticism. He is definitely somebody that has good power. He's very athletically gifted. He fumbles a ton, and that's his biggest issue, but he is definitely somebody that if you can get that under control, he could be a really interesting player. Ollie Gordon, he just fell off a cliff. Some people had him as a first-round projected running back this year. He just has not looked like the same player. To me, he looks, not great when it comes to his change of direction, his vision, his ability to make guys miss, his contact balance, I think even didn't look great for how big he is. Definitely somebody that you got to consider the potential of him after he had 21 touchdowns last year and was incredibly productive. But for me, this is just such a deep, talented running back class, and this year has been really, really rough for Ollie Gordon. And then Jonah Coleman, a transfer from Arizona. He's like 5'9", 230 pounds. So he's incredibly thick. He's tough to bring down in space, but he doesn't play a ton. And I think that could be due to his size. That's just pure speculation, though. So those are the guys that just missed the list. There's, definitely some other guys I watched as well. Kyle Monangai out of Rutgers. We also had Jordan James out of Oregon. All really solid players that I think will get drafted, but this is just such a talented running back class. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Who do you think is going to be, the best running back from this class, maybe outside of AShton Jeanty, because that seems like the obvious answer. Who do you want your favorite team to draft? Who will you be targeting in Dynasty? If you like this kind of content, please hit that subscribe button. While you're down there, hit the like button as well. Both of those things just help out the channel so much. Going to be putting out more of these top 10 rankings, scouting reports, mock drafts, all that good stuff for the upcoming 2025 NFL draft. So you won't want to miss it. Please hit that subscribe button, that like button down below. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one.